Redditors who work with or around that ultra rich. What's the worst excess or waste of money you've seen? I went to college with a lot of wealthy kids. My roommate freshman year was one of them. She was awesome and humble as duck, but her family was loaded. We went to her condo in Cabo for spring break and our return flight was delayed by a day. Her dad was so close to paying $10,000 plus for a private jet to fly us back because I had 2 lectures the next day and my roommate had 1. I wasn't planning on going anyway, so I'm very happy we talked him out of it. They ended up getting their own jet a couple of years later and I see a lot of pictures of their dogs with their own seats and tables on the plane. It's actually pretty damn cute. I distinctly remember one guy in my class popping into Apple to buy a new iPad. Rather than walking back to his flat to pick up the one he had left on his desk. He did this more than once. He also paid £4,500 plus per week to live in a London apartment, above a post office no less than 100 steps from the uni. Yet claimed he couldn't get to class in time. His father had ties to David Cameron's government, which led to him being almost untouchable at the uni, despite his utter ignorance of the subject. A buddy of mine used to be a pilot on private planes for rich people. One time he was waiting for the guy he was going to fly that night at the main airport in town. And the guy called him and asked him to fly to a smaller, non-commercial airport that was closer to this guy's work to save time because he didn't want to deal with traffic. This is not a very big town, so traffic is really non-existent and the drive would have been 15-20 minutes. Instead, my buddy had to redo his flight plan and make the 4-minute flight to this other airport. Probably cost the guy at least $5,000. A very wealthy family invited me to play piano for a party they were hosting at their home, an English Tudor style mansion. The music room had 2 Steinway concert grand pianos, one on each end of the room, worth perhaps $150,000 plus each. No one in the family played these beautiful instruments. They were just there for show and used by a pianist they'd hire for special occasions. My friend is married to a plumber. He was once hired to set up a special room for a famous composer's wife's tortoise. It was a huge room in their mansion that his company set up to be arid all the time, like a desert. I believe it even had sand and cacti in it, and sun lamps. I don't know how much it cost, but it was more than most people spend on their houses. All for their spoiled ass tortoise. A girl I know got mad because her dad sent his private helicopter to pick her up instead of his private jet. God, it's so embarrassing, dad. Nothing like the other people's stories on here. But I used to work for a hotel for years. It was not a fancy hotel. And it was not in a rich area. But a long-term guest of mine wanted to take me and my friend to the casino on his dollar. I knew this man for 2 years by this time, and considered him a friend. So we both agreed to go. When we got there he bought us all a drink. And then he proceeded handing us both a stack of $100 bills. Like $1,000 each. He told us to gamble until we dropped. All he asked is that if either of us won the jackpot, that we would split the winnings with him. Coming from a modest upbringing, it felt like such a waste to gamble that money away. But we all ended up having a great time. And he never expected anything questionable in return. He was a very cool guy. Met this wealthy older couple in a small town in the Santa Barbara wine region. We started talking at this breakfast restaurant and they told me they imported their bread from France. My friend's father lit a £50 knot on fire to then light his cigar. When one of his friends said he was leaving because he didn't want to join another round of drinks he couldn't afford to buy back. Asshole. I'm an accountant with a couple fairly rich clients. Most wasteful thing I have seen is a client who tore down a 6-year-old house to build an even bigger newer one. It had 9 bedrooms, 10.5 HTF bathrooms. It was his wife and 2 kids who lived in it. Next thing down is people who buy massive boats to use one every year or 2. Why not just hire one FFS? My family hosted exchange students every year. Most of the exchange students were quite wealthy, especially compared to us farmers. but one student. We'll call him G. G was that insane kind of wealthy. He had never performed a household chore before. Didn't know how to wash dishes or vacuum. That kind of stuff. Apparently he normally lives on a giant yacht in Rio de Janeiro. Despite having maids do everything for him his whole life. He adapted really well to farm life and was always eager to help out with chores. He still flies back to visit us every couple years because it's cheaper to fly first class here to buy yacht parts and electronics and pick them up personally rather than buy there. A guy I knew in college came from an extremely wealthy family. At one point we happened to be in the vicinity of his grandfather's house and he asked if I wanted to stop and see his car collection. It was approx. 30 cars in his basement, basically a garage beneath his house with an elevator that took cars up to surface level. Mostly old Rolls Royces. Kid cars. Or just weird things like one of the last El Caminos ever made. The car collection didn't strike me as a waste. I assume most of those cars will at least hold their value. His lawn did. Completely flat. Thickest. Softest. Most evenly colored and cut grass I've ever seen in my life. I doubt it was more than 1 stroke 4-inch high. No clippings or signs of a lawnmower. It literally just looked like a thick hunter green carpet that had been unrolled. Except it was about a half acre in size. I walked on it barefoot and it really felt like the softest carpet I've ever walked on. Edges perfectly trimmed. I cannot imagine the cost of maintaining something like that. And really, what is the benefit other than status? The estate next to the one I live on is owned by some Saudi royal who came over for the summer. Along with his 300 plus staff, which all required their own 2017 white Mercedes. Of course. He doesn't have enough space for all 300 staff, so rents houses in a nearby town. Warehouses rent for £2,000 a month. For clarification, by estate I mean, I live in the grounds of a mansion which used to be owned by the Home Office. And has 50-ish houses and flats on the grounds. The Saudi royal owns the next plot of land over. And has to drive through our estate to get to his. Occasionally he will land his helicopter on the cricket field. I have a friend who is the head concierge at a hotel. Whenever there is a large event like a concert, the acts will usually stay there. It's that kind of place. He looks after whatever royalty, celeb or star stays there and makes sure they have whatever they need. He had Rihanna staying there a few years back. Her entourage hired an entire floor and totally ruined the place, but because it was Rihanna, they could do whatever they wanted. He went into all the rooms after they all checked out and all the mattresses had to be replaced as whoever was in there smoking put their blunts out on the bed. They didn't give a duck. Money was no issue, so pay for new mattresses because you can't be asked to move. They also left behind a sheet load of weed, so he took that for himself. They had some of the Saudi elite stay there once, and before the guests checked in, large trucks arrived carrying a selection of supercars for him. Then they sent a team in retile the bathroom and redecorate the rooms to be in line with the style he liked. After all this, the bloke decides that he was going to stay somewhere else. I was an exchange student once and met a bunch of other exchange students, including a group from some, I assume, expensivest college in Florida. I have seldom seen such a bratty pack of spoiled kids, though some were very nice. One bragged that she was given a new car for her 16th birthday and promptly crashed it into a fountain. So her parents got her a new one. Which was just as well because the new one was a nicer color. I would have to say that that second car was the worst waste of money I have ever personally encountered. I work in a very wealthy town. The parents will get their kids a brand new BMW when the kids turn 17 and get their licenses. The kids will do something stupid and total the car in less than a year. And the parents buy them a brand new replacement BMW. When I was in college, I was employed by a neurosurgeon and his wife to do one thing. In exchange for being their pool boy, I lived in the pool house for free. Utilities included. My job was to keep the pool clean and act as lifeguard when their kids swam or had a swimming party. During the 2 years that I lived there, I was lifeguard maybe a dozen times. The pool house was like the one on Fresh Prince of Bel-Air. Sometimes I bartended at their dinner parties and made 250 cash. Well, not me. But I have an uncle who works with a super rich Arab family. And he's told me that they literally have a dustbin made of gold. I know a bloke whose dad died and he inherited a construction company and sold it for millions and took a lot of Drew Gus and became an alcoholic, and he used to get a chopper to take him home from the bar. Like not even a 2-minute ride. He died not long ago at 43 from all the Drew Gus and drinking. In college I worked for a super high-end interior designer who fully designed houses for the ultra rich. Like, he did Walton level money houses. I moved furniture for $15 an hour. Anyways. This one particular house we had to move in a pair of custom built Italian recliners. These chairs were hand built. Hand embroidered, and I sheet you not. The wooden legs were vigorously rubbed with a gold bar so as to embed tiny flakes of gold so it shimmered. We moved a pair of these chairs into a third living room on the second floor. The room looked like it had never ever been used, and we just plopped down $30k worth of window dressing in there like it was nothing. I did sit in this throne that would have paid my tuition for a year, and you know what? It wasn't even that comfortable. My boss's 8yo daughter was at our office. I offered her drinks, water, tea or coke. She said, "My parents said that only poor kids drink Coca-Cola." She was too rich to drink Coke. Damaged kid. Did some construction work on a $7 million house. While everything else was already insane about the place. The real kicker was that the owners had purchased the neighbor's paltry $3 million home. And tore it down so that they could extend their patio and backyard out into that space. Pretty crazy if you ask me. I grew up in Santa Barbara and went to school with some very wealthy kids. During high school I took an environmental science class. And at one point our teacher had everyone bringing copies of their electric and gas bills for some project. Most people were somewhere between $30 to $60 a month. But this brother and sister from Montecito had an electric bill of over $3,000 a month because their house had heated floors. Keep in mind that Santa Barbara has one of the most mild, pleasant climates in the country 365 days a year. I'm working as a night auditor and the sheer amount of no-show reservations blows my mind. It also really pisses me off because if they cancelled I could sell that ducking room. Don't forget the mainland Chinese who will drop tens of thousands of dollars on the most premium vintage French wine and mix it with soda. My closest friends are all north of $80 net worth. At summer camp I watched two of them jump in the lake with $4,000 suits and ruined them. One broke his Rolex presidential at a party and didn't care. They also just blow money on anything. My old boss sold his Bentley on Craigslist for $30,000. He spent $400,000 on it. I don't think that needs any more explanation. My sister's roommate's parents in college was loaded. She totaled her BMW 3 times. And they got her a new one each time. She'll drive it at over 40 miles over the speed limit all of the time. Totally reckless. I refused to get in a car with her driving again after my first trip with her. My dad chauffeured around some rich people when I was kid. The one guy he drove was actually a really nice bloke and used to get my dad's family things. One time on a trip to London he asked my dad to bring my mom and then said he had to be in meetings all weekend so didn't need my dad to drive him around. He paid for them to stop at the Ritz and bought them tickets to Phantom of the Opera. Now this guy's kids were a whole different kettle of fish. He was taking them to the amusement park and my dad was driving them. He asked my dad to bring me so I could enjoy the day out too. I went around with this rich kid who would buy whatever he wanted and then throw the change after paying into the nearest trash can. When I asked him what he was doing he said he didn't like carrying around change so threw it away, wouldn't give it to me though. Family member works for a very well-off family. She was asked to head to the butcher and pick up about 20 steaks because they had friends coming over and they were going to make fajitas. So my mum heads to the fancy butcher's. Picks up the steak and it comes to about 200 pounds. When my mum gets back to house, she was told to bin the steak because she changed her mind and was making lasagne instead. Like, not even go put it in the fridge, but chuck it out. Did some electrical work at T-Pain's house in Atlanta a few years ago. We needed a tarp to prevent dust from getting in carpet and generally just keep the area clear. T-Pain says to one of his entourage, "How much does a tarp cost? Go get us a tarp from Walmart," and hands the man $500. I do taxes for the ultra high net worth. I had a client who was having a rough year. His fund was down. He was going through a divorce. He was just angry at the world. We were on the phone and I was giving him more bad news. He owed a lot in taxes even though he had tight cash flow, and he said to me, "Let me tell you about the lesson of the 3S. It'll save you a lot of headaches and heartbreaks. If it flies, floats or ducks, rent it. Don't buy it." I loved that client. Helped teach a class where the students were using SolidWorks. One of the kids asked me, "Can you download SolidWorks on an Apple laptop?" After I said no. He said, "Well, guess I got to go buy a new laptop. There are computers set up there that have SolidWorks already downloaded." I was working a temporary control tower at a resort town this year. I was there for the Forest Service who were flying firefighting planes out of there. There's a pretty steady flow of private jets going in and out, and I can hear them coordinating with the ground services on one of my secondary radios. Most planes call for stuff like cars to be ready, if they need to get gas, etc. One plane, a Gulfstream 4, pretty much top of the line bizjet, is coming in and I hear them talking to the ground operations. They request a vehicle for transporting 3 sets of golf clubs. That's right. Someone had this plane flying 3 sets of golf clubs and that's it. They landed, dropped them off, and left. This plane costs like $10,000 an hour to operate. Private jets are the pinnacle of how ridiculous the gap in our country is between the rich and everyone else. Flying a personal trainer from LA to Phoenix. 5 days a week. First class. For less than 4 hours each day. For 2 years. Because the selection of personal trainers in Arizona apparently wasn't good enough. Not the most extreme. But a friend of ours is petty well off. He ordered a new 4K Apple TV set and accidentally sent it to us, used to live with us. Instead of having us mail it to him or something, he just got a new one.